state in Palestine. How can it do that? It's basically a poor, penniless movement made up mostly of Eastern European Jews. How is it going to do it? And then lo and behold, come 1917, they have this miracle. It's the miracle of the Balfour Declaration. It wasn't really a miracle because in real life the Zionist movement was very well organized, very committed. You have to admire their self-sacrifice, their commitment, their conviction. And they worked very hard, and they managed to extract the Balfour Declaration. 1947, it's after World War II. Israel is now fighting in the United Nations to get its state, and it has, a problem. How is it going to win over all these United Nations member states to this idea of a Jewish state? And it was really quite an amazing thing, because it's the onset of the Cold War, and the Israelis have another miracle. Both the Soviet Union and the United States both vote on the same side, supporting the founding of a state for Jews in Palestine. It was another miracle. It's a resolution. Again, in the real world, it wasn't a miracle. The real world was they worked very hard, lobbied very hard, applied a lot of pressure to a number of states. You could say they bribed some states. You could say they used very heavy-handed tactics with states like Haiti, Liberia, and so forth to get the state. But you have to also acknowledge there was a lot of organizational commitment there, plus a remarkable circumstance. The Soviet Union and the United States voted on the same side. 1966, Israel is having a pretty big problem. More people are leaving than are coming to Israel. Its economy is in the doldrums. It looks like the whole Zionist idea is going through the tubes. Well, then they have another miracle. It's called the Six-Day War, the miracle of the Six-Day War. And now Israel is thriving. It's become the pride and joy of American Jewry. And now we move up to your question. Israel has a demographic problem in the 1970s. It's not the first time they have their demographic problem. They had a demographic problem in the 1970s. And how that demographic problem gets solved, now we get closer to your time, it became the miracle of Russian Jewry. The Soviet Union began to decompose, and they were able to bring in 1 million Russian Jews. About 40% weren't Jewish, but that's a separate story. They were blonde and blue-eyed, so they could be, they were good raw material, so we'll call them Jewish, even though we all know they're not. And the 1 million Russian Jews changed the demographic balance significantly. And so my point is that Israel doesn't have like a clear plan. They know there's a problem, and then they wait for an opportunity. And there have been various ideas brooded about. The best one, is the one that was to take the heavily Arab areas of Israel and exchange them with the Palestinians in the event that there's a two-state settlement, to just take the areas of the Galilee and move them, change the border to get the Arabs out of Israel. There are other ideas. You can't rule out the possibility. They're talking now about Arabs being disloyal, fifth column, and all that sort of stuff. And that's the language which then precedes the excuse for expelling them. That's also a possibility, but it can't be done during, as it were, normal times. You have to wait for these unique opportunities, and then you strike while the iron is hot. You have to remember, just to take the case of another miracle, when the United Nations General Assembly created the Palestinian-Israeli state, the two-state settlement, the partition resolution, the Jewish state in this partition resolution was nearly 1/2 Arab. There was no way you could cut up the map of Palestine because Arabs so overwhelmingly predominated demographically. So you have a Jewish state, which is really 50-50. It's half Jewish, half Arab. Well, that's a big problem. So how they resolve it? They have another miracle. They called it, Chaim Weizmann, the first president of Israel, he called it, quote, the miraculous clearing of the land. And the miraculous clearing of the land was, they used it, as it were, fog of war, that first war, to expel ethnically cleanse the newly born Jewish state of its Arab population. Again, it was a unique opportunity. And there's always been a question, what if that war had not happened? What would Israel have done with that Arab population, which was half of Israel? We don't know. And I think they don't have clear-cut, they have contingency plans, but they wait for and hope for, based on their history, there's grounds for it, they hope for the miracles. The only thing you can say is these are man-made miracles. They're miracles in the sense of unique circumstances, but they're man-made or person-made in the sense that they didn't just happen of themselves. There was no miraculous clearing of the land in 1948. The population was expelled.
Thanks. And the next question is...
Thank you. The picture painted of concentration and religion is clearly dire, to say the least. And if I received intent on it, we can see it saying historical factors. And I was just wondering whether or not you think it would ever be possible to change the moral mindset and if so, how?
Look, I think that's a fair question. I don't want to make, obviously, I don't want to extenuate Israel's crimes, but on the other hand, we shouldn't become so narrowly focused that we lose sight of the whole world. There are many places which have very ugly histories, which then turned out, or able to turn around and become quite civilized places. You take the case of Germany. It was the very militaristic and deeply entrenched racist society from the late 19th century through World War II. And probably the best thing that ever happened to Germany was World War II. It was the worst thing, obviously, for the victims. The 30 or 40 million Russians who were killed, the 5 or 6 million Jews who were killed, and all the others. Those are the big figures. But it was actually the best thing that happened to Germany, because it suffered a resounding defeat, a devastating defeat. And I think everybody agrees the most civilized state in Europe, by a wide margin, is Germany. It is. No offense to British young people, but I've had the experience of teaching everyone, and I don't think there's much dispute that the most morally serious students and the most intellectually serious students are the Germans. And that's because of that defeat it suffered. It broke the back of German racism, and it broke the back of German militarism. And so part of the answer is, and I'm not saying this, with any glee, I think part of what Israel needs is to suffer a really devastating military defeat that will clear that society of what's become really a severe illness. It's become, almost satanic in this thirst for war. The whole world wants peace, and then there's this state which just incessantly talks about war. When the National Intelligence Estimate came out from the United States saying that Iran was not embarked on a nuclear weapons program, at least not since 2003, the whole world breathes a sigh of relief. There's not going to be war with Iran. And if you saw the headline that day of the Financial Times, it was the whole world, thank goodness, no war. And there's one column to the left, Israel says, report not true, have to attack Iran. And during the first week of the Gaza massacre, there was an article in